Hey there, all you weirdos. This is a bit of a different week. Some things came up in all of our personal lives. I actually moved out of state, and Kyle got called away on a business trip. So we decided this week we were going to unlock a bonus episode from one of our Patreon series called It Gets Weirdish. It Gets Weirdish is a show where we watch movies that take place in the world of weird. Anything from horror movies to sci-fi stuff to just anything that kind of ties into the concepts we cover on the main show. This is the first episode of our Paranormal Activity series, where we watch the first episode or the first movie in the Paranormal Activity franchise. This is on our $5 tier, which gets you bonus content every week. We also have a $2 tier, which gives you content every other week. So the $5 tier gets you a bit more a bit more variety of series. We have, Kyle has a show, I have a show. We have Garrett doing shows sometimes, and so you get a bit more at the $5 tier. And you can find all of this on patreon.com/itgetsweird. So go ahead and go give this a look if you like the content here that you're about to hear. Thank you all for listening and for bearing with us as we have a bit of a strange week. This won't be a normal thing. We're looking forward to getting back to regular episodes as soon as possible. So enjoy the show.
Hello, spooky patrons, terrifying listeners. It is I, Kyle, co-host of It Gets Weird and It Gets Weird subsidiary, It Gets Weirdish, which is the name we have absolutely decided on and we're just sticking with for our movie podcast. And with me as always,
I'm Niall and I'm the skeptic, but we've got to keep recording. We can't stop recording all of this. We have to keep going. This is going to be very important. We're getting a lot of good shit. Got to show off my gear. We got to keep fucking recording everything no matter what happens.
Normally I wait for him to get through that tirade before we start recording.
Normally that doesn't make it onto the show.
Yeah, normally that doesn't make it in, but tonight, I guess it's appropriate. Yeah. Also, sorry for a moment ago with my voice, had a bit of a frog in my throat. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
I mean, it's not Halloween yet, probably. If you're listening to this. I mean, you could listen to this on Halloween.
Yeah, you could bank this for a couple days and hit it right on this the hollowest of eves.
But all of October is Halloween to me. And, I know that people are like, oh, yeah, I bet you think Halloween's all October and you love those spooky vibes and that. I say, yeah, I do. So
I keep Halloween in my heart on every day.
Same.
So that's where I live.
There is an inner goth Kyle that never came out, but vibes so hard with Halloween and spooky energy and all that stuff. And, in October, I feel pretty comfortable letting them out a little bit.
Should we both just go hardcore into a goth phase in our 30s?
If I felt like I could get away with that with the job I was in, I absolutely would do it, but I cannot, and I won't. So,
that's fair.
Wow, we watched a movie.
We did.
A spooky movie for this episode of It Gets Weirdish. What movie was it, Niall?
I don't know. What's like the time frame in which you would call something a classic? Because I don't feel like this is quite old enough to do that, but This is one of those things that I think will eventually enter the horror canon, if there is such a thing in the mid-2000s.
Yeah.
We watched the original Paranormal Activity.
Yeah. What year is this movie, by the way? 2008?
It takes place in 2006. So I'm guessing it came out in like 2007 or something. 1 second.
Yeah, 07, 08. I'm guessing it's around there. Well, I saw this movie in theaters.
Me too.
Did we see it together? I don't think we did.
I think this was slightly before. Actually, we might have.
It's hard to say. We'll figure
2007.
out. 2007
came out.
I mean, we would have been hanging out in 2007. 2006 is when we first really met each other.
Mm-hmm. I know I saw this with my ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
Which means that there's a decent chance you were there because
maybe
that was kind of part of the friend group.
I can't remember if I saw this with anybody. Any movie that I saw before 2010, I can't remember who I saw it with.
Yeah.
But
frankly, any movie in the last 6 months, you also don't always remember who you watched it with, too.
Is true,
but
and alarming for me to think about. Yeah, but this is you make an interesting point here about it being a classic, because I was thinking watching this in 2021, right tonight,
Mhm.
that this is definitely a movie that it's like I was trying to think if there's like a trio of movies, kind of like how Halloween, Friday the 13th, and A Nightmare on Elm Street, how that was like the trio of movies of that era of horror
Mhm.
that was like important for the canon.
Yeah.
And I couldn't think of anything.
I honestly like. I think you would have to. I don't remember exactly when the series started, but I know some of those movies you just mentioned were a couple years apart. So it'd probably there's a decent chance that this would be in the echelon of Saw,
Oh, yeah, okay.
and then
Saw.
because like there is a certain kind of realism in 2000s horror that they really like. Gone were the days of schlocky practical effects, and in were the days of trying to look like actual people were getting murdered. Um, and I feel like you can kind of put this in. I don't know what the third one would be. They don't always have to come in threes, and like even
I know,
if you
but
look at the trio you talked about, they're part of a larger framework of 80s
sure.
horror.
But those
But
are the three people think of. And I'm
yeah,
just saying, what will people think of the mid 2000s, the early 2000s horror? And Saw, I think, is a good suggestion.
yeah,
I'd struggle to think. I like maybe it's The Ring, but
maybe
that's like, isn't that 2000 or 2000? I mean, I guess it's about the
yeah,
same.
Saw's in the same area. And then like I feel like there's a breaking line before you get into like The Conjuring and Insidious
Right.
times.
Because that's like
Like
almost 2010, right?
yeah, so like we have like this is that like 2000s wave, and then we get into the ones that start to embrace some of the like wackier, not wackier in like their comedies or anything, but like I feel like there's a line of demarcation between this and your like Insidiouses and
Hmm.
your Conjurings and
I
your
agree.
you know, I don't know what the third one would be, but
I don't know. Not irrelevant. It was
yeah.
just how I was thinking about it. But watching this movie with our experience, our history since we first saw it, because I think I maybe rewatched it once since it came out in theaters
Okay.
before tonight. And that also had to have been like, I don't know, 10 years ago
Hmm.
at this point. And watching it back then, I remember liking it. I also remember complaining about jump scares.
Yeah.
That was like my thing that I like really hooked hooked my claws into at the movie at the time. Now watching it, I think I like it more than when I first saw it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said this because I went through a whole thing with this series of movies because this series of movies is one of the first horror movie franchises that I started to consume as they came out. I think is a very fair thing to say because I think I saw the first three of these in theaters maybe, and I really liked this first one when it came out. And then over time, I got sick of found footage because we were watching so much horror at the time and so much like modern stuff and like stuff like the stuff that we were watching ended up being a lot of found footage stuff. And we've talked before about some of the ones that we like, you know, Blair Witch, Grave Encounters. I would personally add this one to the list. I think
Mm.
that this is a pretty good found footage horror movie, but I got very sick of found footage just in its entirety um before I got to the third one in this franchise. So I was very much like, and even going back and saying I don't really want to watch fucking Paranormal Activity anymore. Found
Same,
footage, I'm
yeah.
sick of it. And I feel like now it's we've gotten like there still are found footage horror movies like coming out all the time, but it's not the big trend in horror anymore.
Right.
And I feel like I now can go back and appreciate ones that do it well. Like we Jules and I watched Blair Witch, I think for this like a long time, like a while ago, a couple years ago. That movie is fantastic.
Yeah,
Like it's
really
really
good.
good.
I honestly exact same scenario for me where like I got sick of the found footage. There's like for people who maybe don't remember the 2000s era of horror movies, it was really after Paranormal Activity, it was just established that that was I mean, and can you blame people for trying to it's like
No, this movie was made for like $5
they made it
and made
for
$1 billion. Like it's
it made
ridiculous.
it was they spent no money on this and they made so much money and it's like it's not the same thing, but it's like how all these studios tried to capture the Harry Potter thing,
Hmm.
where you see this thing that's like really successful and you try to replicate what made it successful and that never works.
Yeah.
The thing is, and what that kind of, with this movie, this was like a low budget, no, but like they like screened it. I don't know the story of, I'm sure there's like a story, but it got somehow put into wide
Yeah.
reaching
So
theaters.
I,
So
I read into this, like I was very interested in this like a long time ago. So
mhm,
I read a bit into it and have a vague understanding of it still. Basically, this was an independent horror movie that was shot and screened at some like festivals and everything. Uh it was made for like no money, and then Steven Spielberg's production company got a hold of it and acquired the rights to it, and they then changed the ending for the theatrical release. And so there are multiple endings to this movie. We'll talk about that, but like they basically went in and kind of tweaked some things in the editing. I there might have been some very light reshoots other than the ending. I don't 100% remember for sure, but once the studio got a hold of it, it then they redid the ending and packaged it up a bit, and then that's the version that everyone sees now.
okay.
So this did exist before, like slightly before that, in a very small form, and there is an original ending that I've only ever seen online. I'm very curious if it exists in DVD form somewhere. I honestly don't know. It is an ending that I think I prefer. But it is interesting how this really was just like a pretty low budget indie horror movie that a production company was like, oh, let's just fucking buy
Yeah,
this up and throw it out there.
went from limited screening to like a studio smelled money
Yeah.
and just put it out there for everyone and marketed the fuck out of it.
This is really like kind of proto Bloomhouse.
Yeah.
Like the Bloomhouse model took it, you can trace the Blumhouse model back to stuff like this, where it's just like we make a bunch of stuff for very cheap, and some of it will hit, some of it won't. And the ones that hit will more than make back the money that we spent on the ones that don't. And this is kind of I feel like this is kind of the not the absolute beginning, because you like Blair Witch and stuff before it, but this is kind of the mainstream codification of like low budget indie horror being a thing. And I feel like
Mhm.
that kind of pushed that into the mainstream. Those things existed, of course, beforehand. Evil Dead was made for like no fucking money out
Mhm.
in the woods. Everyone has those stories, but like I feel like this was kind of studios started sniffing around after this.
Yeah. It's interesting because you think of something like Evil Dead, and I mean, it's so far removed from this era of movies at this point, but like revered in this cultish sort of way. Um, but like back when Evil Dead was able to then make Evil Dead 2 and then into Army of Darkness with its success, relative success,
Hmm.
it's not like a studio, as far as I know, like that was huge, just was like, oh, we can make a ton of money on this and then flip the series essentially. Like I don't
Yeah.
think that's how it went down with Evil Dead, the trilogy there.
No, it was a
Uh,
creative force. Like
yeah,
it was Sam Raimi. Like because even two different studios made Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2.
right. So that's all to for me to say what changed that made a studio be like, we can take a chance on this low budget thing, because like like when I think about it in retrospect, you think of those low budget movies from like the 80s, the 90s. Why didn't one of those take off? What was it about 2007 Paranormal Activity? Like what happened? Like
I don't know for sure, but I feel like there's an analog to the music world here of like the the level of quality that could be produced for cheap outside of the studio system
mm,
got to a certain point that then it was able to meet the like this movie looks like it was shot on a decent camera and the sound kind of sucks.
yeah,
But it fits the vibe of it. And so but like it sucks in a way that is like packageable as part of the concept
right.
and is still like legible, but it's it fits the tone of the movie and the style of the movie, and honestly probably makes it a bit better than if this movie like was a little slicker. I feel like if we watch any of the sequels, we will start to notice that like as they get slicker, they
Yes.
feel a little less true to themselves.
I've only seen the first and the second. You, I think, said watched up to the third,
Yeah.
and I remember immediately feeling that way with the second one. In this one, the rough around the edges, like low budget production works completely for the concept, like
Yeah.
you said. So, um, I feel like you're right. Yeah, as time goes on, it's going to make less and less sense why it looks the way it does, why it sounds and feels the way it does. Uh, so maybe Paranormal Activity is a little bit of a flash in the pan.
Yeah, I mean, but now like you can make a movie that looks better than this on your iPhone now.
Sure.
Like so it's just going to get people are now like look at the stuff that like King Vader does. Do you know follow him on Twitter? He's
Name
he
sounds
makes like a
familiar.
lot of like live action like anime stuff, like anime riffs and like movie riffs and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Okay.
And like his stuff looks like very good. And I mean he's gotten more better equipment now, but like a lot of that started on very minimal equipment.
Mhm.
And he's got stuff with Netflix now. Like he's doing pretty well for himself. It is interesting how like as the barrier of entry gets lower to the access to like professional-ish equipment, you then start to see these like side like low budget passion project things that people made seep into the mainstream.
Yeah. Now, okay. I really, I do want to talk about what this movie's about,
Yeah,
although
we
I
should.
mostly want to talk about the things around it, to be honest. But we can talk about what it's about for anybody who, for some reason, maybe doesn't know. We can it's going to be a quick explanation. There's not a lot of like story beats to get into here.
No, like, but I do think some of the stuff about like the characters and
Sure.
the way this movie escalates itself, I think is very well done. And so like I think that's definitely worth talking about.
Yeah.
I think there is like a level of of craft to this movie that makes it stand out a bit. Not and I think it's interesting to talk about. But like let's just run down our basics here.
Yeah.
This movie is about two characters. There is a third person that there are four people in total that you see. But the two mains are Katie and Mika, a couple that live in a very nice house in
San Diego.
San Diego. Was it
California.
San
Yeah,
Diego?
was San Diego.
And Mika is a day trader,
Man.
which I like. My first thing when I started watching this movie was like, if this movie were made today, he would be a crypto bro. He would 100% be like badgering Katie about Dogecoin.
And in both scenarios, he gets what he deserves.
Yeah, like he would definitely be talking about Ethereum and shit. It's yeah, but he's a day trader and he is just bought a camera and he's our we must film this person in this found footage horror movie. And then we have Katie, who is his girlfriend, live-in girlfriend. They live together in this house.
She's a student. They do
She is a
mention.
student, and she's studying to be a teacher
Yes.
of some kind. And she has had paranormal experiences throughout her life that began when she was a child, when what she kind of described as what seemed like a sleep paralysis demon would float
Yeah.
above her bed.
Well, and that's kind of where it's like if you know what sleep paralysis is, that I was thinking about that scene. She's describing there's like not a lot of weird stuff has happened in the house yet, maybe
Mhm.
a couple creepy noises, but then she talks about how as a kid all this weird stuff happened with a shadowy figure that stood at the edge of her bed and would like look at her and all this stuff and she couldn't make it and it's just like a shadow.
Mhm.
You're like, okay, well maybe she's just suffering from sleep paralysis.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's a good little setup where the movie, like when it finally breaks it to you that you're dealing with something genuinely paranormal, it works very well to be kind of like shocking.
It is interesting watching this movie now after doing a lot of episodes for this show about the paranormal, because like I only had the basic understanding of what EVP was when I last watched this movie. I didn't know anything really. And the guy does EVP experiments, and we'll talk about it. But there's like multiple things in this episode that are in this movie that it's like, oh, okay, so they actually are pulling on like a little bit of paranormal researcher stuff for this movie. Not all
Yeah.
of it is executed very well, um, but it is interesting to see that in the movie. So
Yeah, it's not executed well because the guy doing it is an amateur moron.
yeah, yeah, that's the fun thing is like you can look at it as it's not being done well because the guy's a dipshit, and that's one of the biggest things about this movie is how much Mika sucks.
Yeah, he is just so dumb. So basically, the whole idea of this movie and the reason that you can watch it at all is it is supposedly this footage that was recorded. He went out, bought a nice little camera, and is like Mika tells Kate, "Hey, I'm gonna record us at night while we're sleeping and stuff. I know you've had weird stuff going on and you've been hearing noises at night. We're gonna get to the bottom of what's going on and see what's fucking around in our house."
Yeah.
And Mika, for like a good portion of the movie, is like not buying the paranormal aspect of it. He's
Yes.
just completely a skeptic, but not in like a like rational way. Like I guess kind of rational, but also he's like so dumb
Yeah.
that he just like can't even like follow the thread of the paranormal stuff that's happening like when it starts getting more apparent.
He
So
he is very stubborn.
yes.
Like one of the biggest things about Mika is he is incredibly stubborn to the absolute detriment of himself and his girlfriend. And it is kind of the fool that ends up dooming everyone. I think it's very interesting watching it, like, because in my history with this movie, the first time I watched it, I was just like, oh, I like this. I didn't really have like a lot of deep thoughts about it. And then the times I rewatched it after that, I just hated Mika. I thought
Yeah.
he sucked so bad and was so annoying. And I thought like, oh, the characters in this movie are kind of annoying. It's a found footage movie. They're annoying. And so I really kind of like cast off this franchise for quite a while. And looking back at it now, I think it's very intentional, and the guy playing Mika is doing a pretty good job of being like just the villain of this movie in a way. Like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
he's working heel. Like I
Yeah,
don't know how
he
else
is
to
the
explain
villain.
it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. He's the villain of the movie. I mean, yes, there is a demon,
Yeah.
but this guy, there's all this stuff set up where it's like there are hints in the movie that if Mika had not fucked with anything,
Yeah.
they might have gotten out of the spoilers. They might have gotten out of this story alive.
Yes.
Well, I guess technically Katie does, depending on the ending.
Depending on the ending.
So yeah, I think it's a lot more effective now than I remember feeling. I think when I was younger, I just like I don't know if I had like some sort of like I don't know. I wanted to like I don't know. I felt like my analysis back then, quote unquote, was like just to be like the characters are dumb.
Yeah,
You know,
I there is a definite thing that I've noticed in myself watching movies over the time of like where I've grown from, oh, this character sucks and they're annoying, to realizing no, this character is acting in an intention like I've stopped getting worked quite as much by by like annoying characters, where I realize that it's like a part of the thing and they're acting the way that this person acts. Like I don't know. There's
well,
just because a character is annoying doesn't mean they're doing a bad job or the
Right.
movie is bad, you know?
yeah, and also one of the things that's always like I think and I think a lot of people will talk about this with found footage movies is how realistic the portrayal of this character is. And I think when I was younger, I was like, oh, they're like so dumb, it's unrealistic, things like that. Now I'm like, oh yeah, I know two people like this in real life. Like I
Yeah.
know people who act and talk like this. It's like one of the things that I was remembering about, and if y'all don't mind, I'm going to do a brief spoiler of A Quiet Place,
Okay.
the John Krasinski hit film. So fast forward 5 minutes. I hate that movie. It's so fucking bad. And there's a character. The characters in it are too stupid to live. They they die in the stupidest ways. Here, I feel like there is a difference. Like, there is no reason for the stupidity that occurs in a lot of A Quiet Place that leads to people dying. It makes no sense,
Mhm.
just for a number of reasons. In this movie, though, it is very well established why he's doing the stupid things that he does.
Yeah, and I feel like I can't speak to A Quiet Place. I've never seen it,
I know. Yeah,
but
sorry.
it. No, you're good. I just that's the reason I'm not commenting on it. But I do think that that there is an element of like they set up Mika's flaws in ways that like before everything really starts to go bad. They set him up as a human character with a lot of flaws. He is an asshole. Don't get me wrong. I think he is a kind of a dirtbag boyfriend. Um, but he does feel like a human being in a way that a lot of the characters in found footage movies don't really
Right.
feel. Oh, Cloverfield. That might be the third
Oh
one.
yeah, Cloverfield. Yeah, yeah.
That was a big deal.
I really loved that at the time. I haven't seen it in a long
I've been
fucking
meaning to
time.
rewatch that one too.
Yeah, yeah. It's really hard to watch because like one of the things that I would think of with Grave Encounters, where even though I like that movie and it's silly, I do remember the characters. There's a lot of
Oh,
stupid bullshit.
yeah, that movie is I feel like that one goes the opposite direction where everything is very heightened
Yes.
and the people are playing kind of schlocky, over the top caricatures.
Yeah.
Whereas in this movie, I think these people read as pretty true, and I think that is the much more difficult route to take in making a movie like
Right.
this.
Yeah. So there's a lot of little things that establish character for both of our main characters here. Like it's you realize pretty early on just from like how they're acting and saying about how they feel about what's happening in the house.
Hmm.
And so early on, Kate, you know that she is afraid of the paranormal. She says things along the lines of like, you may not believe in this, but like I've dealt with it before. Just talking about her experience as a kid, and Mika is just like dismissive and like just like kind of laughing it off. And like I said, eventually it reaches a point where it can no longer be denied.
Yeah, he literally like you can look at the beginning of this movie and see Kate is someone who is dealing with a thing that she's been dealing with basically her whole life. After her house was burned down, she's been dealing with these kind of spirits, well, demons, um, throughout her life, on and off. And Mika sees this as an opportunity to buy a shiny new camera and maybe make a sex tape if he's
Yeah,
lucky. Like that's literally
that's
like
his
kind
whole
of the
thing.
setup
Yeah,
of this movie is he's excited to fuck around with this new camera and this gear that he bought. Um, and he's more excited about that than he is like interested in actually solving his girlfriend's very like the problem that whether or not he believes it is very real to her, and it makes him come off very callous, and I feel like you only really get the actual like oh he does actually like care for her later in the movie,
hmm
when shit really starts to go down, and it makes it that's one of the things that makes him like a lot less sympathetic, I think, is how long it takes for Mika to cut out the shit and realize that his girlfriend, whether or not something is actually happening, is scared and going through something.
yeah. So basically, the rest of this movie is they get a psychic medium to come and check out the house early on, and
Hmm.
he's like, basically, he is exposition. He's
Hmm.
like, there's hauntings. That's one thing. There's also demons, which are not humans. Hauntings are usually ghosts of humans. Demons are not human, and they wreak havoc. They cause pain. They want people to suffer. And so he kind of stops in and is just like, yeah, so that's what demons are. Also, I feel a presence here, but I don't really know. Also, if it is a demon, you should get somebody whose expertise is in demonology.
Yeah, he recommends a demonologist. Um, who we never actually see because by the time Mika allows Katie to call him, he is out of the country.
The demonologist,
The
not Mika.
demonologist, correct? Yeah, and so like Kate was gonna call him call the demonologist the next day after the psychic left, but Mika was like, no, we got to figure this out ourselves. We don't need another person in here.
Which is
Still,
again his character trait of like, I'm going to solve this. It's not a demon. I'm going to figure out what all this weird shit
yeah.
is going on. So
He's very much a king of the castle kind of type where it's just
yeah,
like no one I don't want anyone in here messing with my shit. This is my house. This is my girlfriend. Very kind of possessive and protective in a way that ends up getting him killed.
yeah, yeah. So things progress in pretty horrific ways. There are things that I had forgotten about the movie. Like, for instance, there's a point where Kate is like passed out on the floor in the kitchen
Mhm.
and she has a cross in her hand and she's like her hand is just covered in blood.
Yeah.
And I don't remember that. I didn't remember
Yeah.
that at all.
I think the thing that I forgot about this movie is how effective the build of the scares are.
Yeah.
Like I remember it being very tense in the theater and then going back and rewatching it and being in my like I'm not scared of anything kind of phase with horror movies. And now I can kind of appreciate it for the things that it does very well. And I think the thing that I most like about this movie is how it sets up its framework to build the atmosphere of the story.
Yeah.
And that basically is you have these time lapse sequences of nighttime that they're given title cards of the night number and the date. So you get a sense of like how long this movie happens over the course of like 21 nights, if I remember correctly.
Mhm. Starts on the 5 years and 7 days after 9/11.
Yeah.
Um
It goes until 5 years and 28 days after
yes,
9/11,
yes.
which is very significant. No,
Yeah.
but it so you have these like sequences that speed up through the evening, like through the nighttime while they're asleep, and they have like a time code in the bottom. And whenever the like clock in the bottom right hand of the screen starts to slow down, you know something's about to happen. And it sets this up early by like it just being the door moving a little bit. And so it teaches you the language of like it's going to speed through the night until something's going to happen, and then it goes to normal real time, and that's when everything gets really tense.
Yeah.
And it builds this language throughout the movie of using that as the framework to then you then get them in the next day going back and you know Mika's usually reviewing the footage and finds whatever and is trying to figure out what is going on and making you know doing research notes, and stuff starts to happen throughout the day and later on. But I really like the build of the paranormal stuff in this movie, from a very minimal door moving a little bit up to
chaos.
up to full on like the demon is running through the house and slamming doors and dragging people and like possessing like it's very it might be like I really appreciated this movie this time. I think
Yeah.
it's legitimately quite
No,
good.
I agree. And things that like wouldn't like I probably like I don't even know if I acknowledge these things. So first of all, I like you said, with the way the whole framework of it is such that it's honestly kind of brilliant, because it's like you cut to the nighttime scenes and that is the movie saying time to be tense.
Yep.
You literally you have no if you are willing to buy into the movie's thing, you have no choice.
Yep.
It doesn't matter how what actually happens in those scenes. As soon as you cut to those scenes, it's like your brain is just on high alert. It's a really, really great device for making it spooky as fuck.
Yeah. And then by the time that builds up to the point where it starts to break that rule and all bets are start to be off, it then you start going from like, oh, these are the tense parts, and then I can relax during the daytime.
And then you can't.
Then you can't.
Yeah.
And that's when you hit
really
the third
good.
act of the movie.
The other thing that I also really appreciate is something I can't help but I guess like I guess you could call it like world building,
Mhm.
because there is this thing that I appreciated on this watch all these years later, where it again, it's a simple thing, but like I didn't think about it, I think at the time, where it's established very early on that if it's a demon, and this is before the activity is the super paranormal.
Yeah.
If this is like really early on, it's established if it's a demon, it feeds off of negative energy.
Yes.
And while you don't know exactly what that means, you have an idea. And so what follows is this self-fulfilling prophecy of manifesting this demon as it is able to do little things that unnerve the people in the house, and then their emotions and tensions rise, and then that is just this feedback loop of making this thing stronger.
Yep.
And it never outright tells you that's what's happening, but you know that that's what's happening, and I think that's really, really great.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that like the thing that it sets up very well is the Ouija board.
Yeah.
I think the Ouija board is a very good element in the movie. Like this is a thing that gets used in a lot of scary movies. It's a thing that is always like, oh, people say don't play with the Ouija board. It's gonna make things worse. And the person's like, I want to fucking play with the Ouija board, and that's like a trope. But this movie sets it up that when the psychic, when the psychic is there, Mika, who's totally not taking any of this seriously and just being a total dick to the guy, is like, why don't we just get a Ouija board and just talk to the thing? If it wants to communicate with us, why don't we just talk to it? And he's like, no, don't do that.
Don't, yeah.
If you try to speak to this thing with a Ouija board, that is opening a line of communication, and that is welcoming the demon in.
It's an invitation.
It's
I
an
mean, that's like a through line with all paranormal shit. You do not invite it further into your home. And again, this is another one of those things that planted this idea in my head of like, well, if they had not fucked with it and they had just been, kind of scared, would it have really actually progressed in such a way? Because it starts to get worse over time.
Yeah.
But I think it gets significantly worse once Mika starts like threatening it and like being like, what's out there, and
You cowardly piece of shit.
you piece of shit, like saying stuff like that. That made it so much worse. I think it never tells you direct, like nobody looks at the camera and says Mika's making, well, okay, Kate does accuse Mika of making it worse.
Yes.
So it is pretty heavily
Insinuated. But this is the thing that we talk about in I forget what we were talking about this about, but like I like when movies don't have an like have those things spouted by an expert, so that when you as an audience member hear it, that is only the people in the movie's best guess as to how the rules of the world work.
Right.
It is not an objective truth. That is the people in the situation trying to figure this shit out, and it allows for. Oh, it was when we were talking about. I was talking to. I think I was talking to you and like people this weekend about. I rewatched Halloween 2, and when you look at Halloween versus the sequels, and this happens in like every franchise, the more you demystify and explain the backstory and lore and everything of these characters, and the more definitive answers you give, the less room there is for like, I think, actual like good horror. And so like I'm totally down for, in that movie, the example I was giving was Loomis is talking about he calls it Samhain, but Selwyn, and how it's this thing of the evil. It's when evil is at its heightened point, and Michael Myers is pure evil, and he's kind of likening it to, but in kind of a metaphorical way, to Samhain. And then later in the sequels, in like Halloween 4 and 5, they legitimately give druidic origins to the evil of Michael Myers. And it totally is like,
that's so much worse.
You make it so literal and so like there's nothing. And it's a thing that I hate about the Rob Zombie remake of Halloween is it demystifies everything about the character, and you're just left with like a guy that walks around with a knife, and it's like, I don't.
There are two ways to make a horror movie extremely, okay, there's a number of ways to make horror movies extremely effective, but I think it's at their core, there are two things you have to do. One are you can either do one of them or you can do both. And the two things that I think of are either there is a not knowing a significant not knowing,
Mm-hmm.
that is going to drive the horror uh, to another level. The other thing that you can do, I think, is there can be no escape.
Yeah,
Those
I
are
was
the
going to say
two
the
things.
inevitability. Yep.
There's an inevitability, no escape. You can do both of those things and just have a real fucked up experience. But the knowing, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like, honestly, that's exactly why I hate when people just flat out show the monster in full.
Yeah.
Like, and honestly, all these things that I just said that I think you should do, I have a feeling are going to be dropped while we go through this series of movies. It
Yeah.
is going to melt away. Like, one of the things I remember about the second movie is that they show you like a demon.
Yep.
And
The
it's
most
not
you get in this
scary.
movie is a shadow.
Yeah. Yeah, you
And
get shadow and footprints.
Yep.
And those are done in such effective, creepy ways. You just need to let the imagination play with that.
That is the thing that this movie does so well, is leaving so much of it up to your fucking imagination. They use sound effects, and they use like very slight, like lights turning on and off, doors opening and shutting. The most like violent thing we see on camera before the actual ending is someone getting dragged out of bed.
Yeah.
And that is by a force that you cannot see.
Yeah.
And it makes it so effective. And I think that it really, this is one of those things where I don't think this is going to happen, because like you said, I think it happens in number 2. I don't want to ever see a fucking creature in this entire movie series.
It's okay. She'll never hear this.
Yeah.
And I'm not even trying to put her on blast, but one of our friends, Brittany.
Okay.
We were watching horror movies together a few months ago. I can't remember what was going on, but we were like hanging out, watching horror. And I remember saying, I can't remember what movie we were talking about, but the conversation was essentially me saying, I really love X horror movie. And her going, really? They didn't explain why this and that. And I was like, right. That's why I love it.
Why, yeah.
And here's the thing, Brittany, love you. You're a good
Very
friend,
good person.
like
Love
a
her.
sister to me. But her whole thing was like, no, I want to know all the lore. I want to dig out all the, like, she wants to know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's not scary at all to me.
She's a big fan of the Conjuring franchise and the Insidious franchise.
Yes, Insidious is like her favorite horror movie, which like it's not. I don't think it's that bad.
No,
or
I
anything.
like that.
think
I
it's a good
legitimately
movie.
think in the first
And the
Insidious
Conjuring
is
the
good.
first one's pretty good. But there is. I think I hate to say. I think that you and me, Niall, are a little bit in the minority with that opinion on horror movies.
Yeah,
I think the diehards.
I'm down for a good creature feature,
Sure.
but I feel like there's a different vibe to that.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, and like, yeah, I definitely think that there are ways to do things like I said, like a creature feature is totally a different vibe. But if you're going to be dealing with ghosts, if you're going to be dealing with all this demonic stuff, you just really shoot yourself in the foot by making everything known and visible. It just doesn't work as horror for me.
Yeah, I think I fall a little less like far down that scale as you do, but I still am closer to your end. I like an air of mystery to my horror.
Yeah.
Unless it is like an apocalyptic, like inevitability horror, like like you said, like I'm cool with that, but I like a good shadowy, half visible monster.
Yeah. Another really effective one that I personally really like, but I think people really hate because it's such a dismal movie is The Ritual. Did you see The Ritual?
Which one is that?
There's an elder god in the woods.
Yes.
I really enjoyed that movie, and that movie is all about the inevitability.
Yep.
You see a pretty creepy monster in it. Pretty much, it's kind of in shadows, but you get to see like a creepy monster. But when I see that creepy monster, I'm just like, ooh, that's really cool. I'm not afraid of it. I mean, it would suck to like encounter it in real life, but it doesn't exist. So
it's kind of it's like I you know, there are good monster effects out there. Like one of my favorite all time movies is The Thing.
Yeah. Easy.
You see the monsters in that movie, they fucking rule. It's great.
But there's a significant not knowing in that movie too.
And that's the It's Among Us.
Like if you want to show the monster,
Yeah.
you need to give it to me in such a way that it is a visceral shock.
Yeah.
Like if I'm going to go back to, I'm sorry, I realize this isn't a good. It's the only movie I'm thinking of. It's not good for you, Niall. But when I think about A Quiet Place and how much that movie fucking sucked, it shows you the monster in full, and it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It's the blandest shit. There's nothing creepy about it. The Thing is so effective at being a terrifying, shocking monster. But then on the other hand, you have the not knowing of what it is, why it's doing what it's doing, and you will never get that answer. Like those questions are never answered, and it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah. It comes from space, and
That's
it. It's trying to get out there.
They have, and they're the whole time they're like guessing, right? Like they're guessing at what's going on.
And you also know that the dog is the reason for all of it. But
Exactly.
that's neither here. That's
So yeah, this movie is. I really really enjoyed this movie on this watch. So basically, where we go from here is things escalate to the point where they're trying to call this demonologist. The demonologist is out of the country. They try to call the medium again, and he shows up and he's like, this is honestly a really creepy scene, I think.
Yeah.
He shows up and he's like in the doorway, and he's like clearly not wanting to. He immediately goes, "What you have here is demonic. Me being here is making it worse. I'm leaving right now."
Yeah. I think the couple scenes that really escalate the thing is that, and then the Ouija board.
Oh, right,
stuff.
the Ouija board. The Ouija board happens even before that, where Mika, in his infinite wisdom, has been basically.
He specifically said, "I will not buy a
Right.
Ouija board." That's important because this guy's is a fucking pedant and a dipshit.
Yeah. You really do nail it by saying that he'd be a crypto bro in 2021. So he gets this loophole with his girlfriend, because that's a sign of a healthy relationship, is when you look for loopholes in your verbal contracts with your significant other.
Yep.
He borrows a Ouija board from like a friend.
Yeah, it doesn't explain really where he got it, because Kate, as soon as she sees it, is
fuck
pissed.
You. Get the fuck out of here. She knows that there's something fucked up going on. She didn't want him fucking with a Ouija board, because that is, again, it's exactly as the medium said. Don't communicate with it. You're just gonna piss it off. And so Mika does it anyways, because he's not respecting the things going on here.
So yeah, he brings in a Ouija board right as there, and he's like, "We got 10 minutes before we have to leave for obviously a date night to try to get their mind off it." And he's like, "We got 10 minutes before we have to leave, Kate. Let's do a Ouija board real quick. You're not going to be mad about it, because I said I wouldn't buy one, but I didn't buy this one, so you can't be mad at me."
She's mad.
And he's very, very confused as to why she's so upset when he does this. And so he doesn't actually get to use the Ouija board, and they leave and go out, and the camera is on it, and you see after a while, some of the plants and the blind and the curtains start to move as if by wind.
Yeah.
And then what's it called? A plancha on the Ouija board?
It's I don't know. It's
the
pointer.
The thing, the Ouija board thing starts to move around, and you see it stopping on stuff, and you can't, the angle of the camera doesn't let you read what it's saying. But you just see it moving, and then it stops moving for a second, and then it starts to move again with a trail of fire across the Ouija board behind it. And that's where the scene ends.
Just lights on fire. That's honestly another really great thing, is it's the camera is left on because they leave the house in a hurry, and and he just forgets about it. The angle, however, on the Ouija board isn't such that you can make out the message that it's saying.
Mm-hmm.
A lesser movie would have been the camera is pointed directly at the Ouija board and you can read the message out. Because then this plays in layer 2. Mika is trying to unravel what was being said based off of that footage. And he's got selections of possible letters it could have been moving to.
Yeah.
And that eventually leads him to, I think it was Goodbye Diane.
Yeah.
And when they eventually realize that they have no options but to try and figure it out for themselves, or try and get through this together without any outside help. He goes online and he finds a website about a woman named Diane who had the exact same experience as Kate in the 60s.
Yeah.
Other stuff has happened also. Like they
Yeah.
retrieve a burnt photo from the attic.
No, we're not talking about this movie in chronological order exactly, but because I feel like you don't need to do that
No.
because there's like kind of these things that increase over time that we can kind of talk about in waves. Plus, it's also the movie's 86 minutes long. It like you can go watch it if you want to. It's pretty readily available out
I
there.
respect the clean 90-minute movie so much.
I love a good 90-minute movie.
I'm sick of 3-hour movies. I mean, if it merits it, of course.
Yeah.
But there are a bajillion movies these days that do not merit their runtime.
I am sick of a 2 to 2.5 hour runtime being the default.
Yeah.
I think movies can. I think there are like a lot of my favorite movies are that long, and that is totally fine with me. But most of them, like most Marvel movies, don't need to be 2.5 hours long. They just do. They just decide to make them that because that is like some sort of algorithmically generated runtime that is. I don't know.
It's butts and seats.
Yeah, it's
like
it has to be some sort of thing like that.
At a certain point, people started thinking about like what value they get out of a movie, not the quality of the movie, but how much time. It's like they like want their money's worth.
Yeah.
And so I guess that means the movies need to be like really long for you to get your money's worth. Never mind the quality of it. Like it's fucking stupid.
Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, the point is this movie's 86 minutes long, no matter what either theatrical or alternate ending version you watch.
No matter what Spielberg's got to say about it.
And that is like, if this movie were 2 hours long, it would not be nearly as good.
Right.
So yeah, we have, the Ouija board thing is happening. He does eventually get, like you said, the Diane stuff. And so we now have a thing. And one of my favorite parts about this whole like sequence is he's like, oh, this girl had the same thing happen. And Kate obviously snaps to, and is she still alive? Like, what happened to her? And he keeps like talking about like, there was the fire, there was this, there was that. And he keeps trying to like not answer the question. And she obviously died. Like,
well, they end up watching
the footage of her like dying in bed very weirdly.
Yeah. It's hard to see what's happening, but it doesn't look good. And all the while that this is happening, the tension, the emotions between these two characters are getting more and more heightened and negative. And so this thing is just, like I said, it's that self-fulfilling thing. It is becoming more, I guess, the way I kind of see it is like more manifested in the world, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like you open the door really further with the Ouija board, and then that's when it starts to get a lot more concrete in its representations.
Yeah.
And it progresses throughout the movie, like having much more power in the physical plane, I guess.
Yeah.
Culminating in it eventually having a shadow in the ending of the movie.
And yet nothing more.
Yeah.
Just a shadow, but it's also able to do really horrifying stuff, such as drag one of the characters out of their bed and bite them in their back.
Yes. And also possess.
Possess, yeah.
That's the thing that I think is like, you can look at this movie and see an executive would be like, okay, but next movie, the demon is more powerful, and you see it.
Yeah.
And you don't need to do that.
Right. Well, they did it.
Yeah, I know. But it's just like that. I like starting to think about how people try to yes and movie concepts for sequels. Is really frustrating because most times they like miss what made the first movie good.
Well, and if you yes and as an executive, you're not going like you need to yes and with like a creative. Yeah. Right? Like you need to yes and with like a director who's interested in making horror.
You need to yes and on the themes.
Right.
Not on the like not on like
the lore in the world. Yeah. Like I mean that works.
You
for
can
other
do
things,
that for certain other films. Like
right.
I am we've
Legend.
talked about this a little bit. Yeah, I am Legend. Great movie. No. not a very good movie. I was gonna say I think a movie that yes ands on the world and lore in a way that like in the second movie I don't like as much, but I think by the third movie becomes its own whole thing, is John Wick.
Oh, sure.
John
Yeah.
Wick, the first movie, is you could not make a sequel in the same vein without making it more ridiculous. I recently rewatched all of the John Wick movies, and the first movie is still perfect. It is like one of the best action movies of recent times. It's just a flawless movie. The second movie starts to make the world like more like tries to like expand the lore and mythos of the world, and it does it in kind of like a without fully going for it in a way that makes the movie not quite as good. And then the third one just goes for it in such a ridiculous way that it then picks up on like it brings me back on. The third movie I think is really fucking good. I think John Wick 3 rules. It's
I remember not being super into it.
I know, and I didn't love it the first time I saw it either. But like watching them and like the three of them, I watched them all three in the same day, and the third one is, if you like accept it for what it is so fucking fun.
I don't want to go on a John Wick tangent,
Yeah.
but we'll never ever get a chance to talk about this movie on this show. But like, the things that I remember about that movie have absolutely nothing to do with the plot.
Yeah.
It is all, wow, that fight was gnarly as fuck, or
Yep.
wow, that fight was silly as fuck. The thing that I remember most
The horse.
is the horse.
Yeah.
I laughed. When we went and saw that in theaters, I laughed so hard at the horse scene. He like slaps the horse's ass and gets it to kick a guy to death.
Yeah.
I laughed so hard.
And it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But so is the whole movie, and
Sure.
it works. Like
Well,
that is
but,
my
okay,
that is my theory for
10
John Wick
minutes
3.
previous to the horse ass slap
Yeah.
kick, he like fucking like breaks a jaw off a man using books.
Yep.
Which
he
sounds
literally-
really ridiculous, but the way it plays out in the actual action is like realistic and gnarly as fuck.
Oh, it's brutal. But then that is literally also, he finds the book where there's a secret dead drop for
Right.
like
Okay,
his
sure.
contact, the stuff he needs to contact his ex-Russian like mob ties that he's
Sure.
been burned from. Like it, sure, that action scene is gnarly, but the entire setup of it is in the ridiculous canon of John Wick 3.
I guess that's true. I think the thing that really takes me out with the horse is that a lot of the action maintains sort of that they do go and like shoot people in the dick, and
The dogs with a
bites
taste for
people's
dick
balls off.
is a
Yeah.
big thing.
I don't know. Maybe I'll watch it again, but
I think I was so shocked by it the first time that I didn't appreciate it. I now am a John Wick 3 apologist.
Well,
I think it's great. But
John
that's
Wick-
neither here or there.
Yeah. I do not mind a John Wick tangent, but to kind of wrap the plot of Paranormal Activity up.
Yeah.
We have some stuff to talk about, because basically it's escalated to a point where they are so strung out, freaked out, that they are like waking up every night with horrible noises and things fucking with them and dragging, like touching them, and it's real creepy stuff.
Yeah, they haven't had a full night's sleep in probably a week and a half at this
Yeah,
point.
at minimum. And it all culminates in you see Kate wake up possessed again. She does this thing where she stands by the side of the bed and watches.
I love this. I love the Kate waking up and just standing and kind of like rocking just a little bit in the middle of the night. I think that's such an effective tool in this movie.
Yeah, it's like there's like kind of a negative fixation on Mika.
Yeah.
By the demon. Like earlier on in the movie, the demon cracks the portrait of, or the photo of Katie and Mika, and it specifically like scratches up his photo.
Mm-hmm.
And there is also this sort of idea running through that, again, never explicitly stated, but is suggested, that the demon is like possessive of Katie.
Yeah.
Not like literally in like a demonic possession, although that does happen, obviously. It's like it wants to like own her.
Yeah. And
he's in the way.
Because Mika is a protective alpha male dipshit, he is challenging the demon's possession of Kate effectively.
Yeah.
And that is the actual dynamic in this movie in a way that like I didn't fully grasp when I watched it originally.
Yeah.
And it makes her very interesting. And like the demon escalates as Mika gets more and more protective and possessive and tries to interfere with the demon's hold on Kate
Yeah,
more and
and
more.
one of the things that so like when she's like standing over him, the way my brain sort of read it this time around is it's almost like the demon is still trying to manifest stronger in their world,
Mhm.
and it's like it's trying to get a good look at him.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Well,
really creepy.
and also like the big turn happens after Mika gets so frustrated that he burns the picture.
Right.
And that seems to be something of significance for the demon, which then kind of pisses it off to enough of a level that it now is actually like he stops just threatening Mika and goes for it.
Yeah. So what the movie ends, at least the first version that we watched, with her standing over him, and then she leaves the room, walks away into the main area, the main level, and then you hear her let out a blood curdling scream. Mika gets up with a start, runs downstairs. You hear a ton of screaming, and then suddenly you hear Mika kind of like go, ugh, and not that comically, but he
No,
basically
it
like
goes
makes a noise,
silent.
and then it just goes silent. And Kate you hear something walking up the stairs. You don't know what it's going to
The
be.
very heavy
Heavy
footfalls
footfalls.
of the demon.
And then Kate walks into the room with a knife, walks up to the camera, looks into the camera, and then slits her own throat.
Now, here's
And
the
she's
thing.
covered in blood.
If you've only seen the theatrical version, that is not the theatrical ending.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to get the original ending with when it says alternate ending. This is another alternate ending. There are 3 endings to this movie that are somehow available. There's the theatrical, which we'll talk about because we ended up watching that one as well, just like the ending. We didn't rewatch the whole movie. Then there's the one known as The Throat, which is that one. And then there's the one known as The Cops, which is the original ending and probably my favorite of the 3. But like that's one that I've only ever seen online in like bootlegs.
So the one that I saw in theaters all those years ago was Kate basically there's like you hear the footsteps come up the stairs. Everything plays out exactly the same except you hear the footsteps come back up the stairs, the heavy footfalls, and then suddenly
Mika's
body is just thrown directly into the camera, and the camera kind of falls over and Mika's not moving, and you see her like slowly walk in, crouch over him, then look up. She looks up at the camera and then suddenly jumps at the camera.
And she smiles.
She smiles and then jumps at the camera and has
Yeah.
like a demon face.
And it's a very jump scary ending, and it's my least favorite of the 3 endings.
Of course,
then the important thing happens where it says the day after the events of this contained in this footage, neighbors or police responded to the scene, found Mika's lifeless body, and Katie's whereabouts are still unknown. And that's what leaves this whole thing open to more movies. And that is the quote unquote Hollywood ending for this movie. I get why that's the ending they went with from a corporate standpoint. I think it's the weakest of the 3.
I've insisted that I don't understand why. I mean, look, I said this to you multiple times. They don't need that ambiguous ending with Kate specifically for there to be sequels. They have established that this thing jumps from person to person and all this other stuff. There's no reason. The only reason I can think of is, like you said, from a sort of corporate standpoint of the audience needs something that they can like call back to the original movie. And all that really tells me is that they don't respect the audience.
My theory is basically they wanted to create this generation's killer.
Sure.
They wanted to turn Kate into a Jason Voorhees, into a demonically possessed killer that then becomes like the antagonist of the series. That they could eventually you could exercise her eventually. Like it is the easier thread to pull as opposed to just starting from scratch with new demonic possessions for every movie.
So definitely from a more
it is the less creative continuation of the series.
Yeah. Now the third ending with the cops is one I've never seen.
Yes, this is the original ending before it got picked up by Steven Spielberg's production company, and here's basically what happens in it. You get the you still get Mika's death, and but once Mika is dead and Kate is in the room, it stops following Mika's footage, and you get the cameras from the cops coming in, responding to a neighbor coming by and finding Mika's body. And the cops swarm the house, come in, and while Katie is still possessed, and then she kind of snaps to and seems to like shake the possession for a second, and the door in front of the cops slams shut, and that freaks out the cops, and they open fire, and Kate gets caught in the crossfire.
Now that's funny because both versions that we watched weren't that, and the movie at the start thanks the local police department
Yes.
that they presumably worked with.
Yep.
And you don't see police in either versions of that movie, but that is an interesting version that I feel like I need to see.
Yeah, it is still a pretty downer ending, but I think it is honestly more interesting just in the way that it doesn't make Kate a like fully possessed villain in the way the theatrical
Right.
cut does, and
Right.
it also doesn't just have her shockingly commit suicide.
Right.
It like, I don't know. I think it is the most. I don't think any of the endings of this movie are particularly amazing.
Yeah.
But I think that the original one is the strongest.
Yeah, that I could see that. I'll have to see if I can find that footage somehow.
Yeah.
So I think we can both agree that we enjoyed this.
Yeah. Actually, real quick, EVP.
Oh,
We didn't
right.
talk about the
yeah,
EVP.
Yeah.
So this motherfucker doesn't even have a ghost box. This guy.
He's just got a mic, right?
Yeah, he literally is just holding a mic and asking questions. And he is using Audacity for those that,
Yeah.
like, it's kind of funny because he's got
and free software cuts in the budget.
Yeah, luckily, you can buy an expensive camera, but you got to skimp on that audio software. And he ends up getting he gets a recording where he's asking questions, and the question that gets a response is, "Do you want to talk to you want me to get a Ouija board?"
Yeah, he asks multiple questions. He's like, come on, speak with me. What do you want? Why are you here? Et cetera, et cetera. And then he asks, would you prefer if I asked you through the Ouija board? And then you get this noise that's like this low grunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gets an EVP in the least ghost huntery way possible.
It's literally just him holding like a wireless handheld microphone and asking questions to the void with nothing for the ghost to manipulate or anything, and he gets a response, which is it's silly, but it tracks that he wouldn't know how to do EVP. I'm curious. Of course, they're never gonna use that as a thing. They're never gonna explain that.
Comes up in a future movie because now we have.
I did buy there's a 6-film Blu-ray collection.
We basically have locked ourselves into watching this whole series.
Yeah.
Frankly, I'd be down to talk about all of them on these It Gets Weirdish episodes. So
probably spaced out a little bit. But
oh yeah, that's what I know. Yeah, absolutely. But I'm saying I'd be down to talk about them here. If that gets brought up, that would be insane.
Yeah, it would be a very weird detail to base the future plot point.
6 of these going on 7 right now of these fucking movies. Yeah. And I imagine they have to keep doing callbacks. That has to be a thing. You would think
so, yeah.
That they probably get into. One thing that I do want to bring up about this movie that drives me nuts, and it's pretty irrelevant, honestly. Really, it is. It is literally just done in service of making the movie creepy.
Yeah.
Who in their right mind, even before Paranormal Activity stuff starts happening in your house, sleeps with the door open?
Yeah.
That is insane to me.
Yeah.
And it's really not a legitimate critique, but I'm just like, yo, I sleep with the door closed my entire life. I would never leave the door open while I'm going to bed because I'm a little weenie who doesn't, my imagination runs wild with that idea, which is, I guess, why it works for creep factor in this movie. But after shit starts going down, why in the world would you ever leave that door open? No, it's not ultimately going to protect you, but it will give you at least some sense of comfort.
Yeah. I hadn't fully thought about that, but that is a good point. They do just sleep and aesthetically it's so that you get that shot of the hallway.
Of course.
where everything
And
takes
it's very
place.
effective.
It's very good. But yeah, it is kind of like a mania. But we know Mika's like a kind of like a total fucking weirdo, like dipshit. So that has to be a Mika thing.
I don't know. I feel like it's not even like commented on in the movie. So
Yeah.
it's like literally there's no reason, and that's probably why nobody comments on it, is like there's no reason for that to be open except for it to be creepy. And again, not really a criticism, just like a thing that like I'm watching and I'm like, I would have never had that door open
Yeah,
ever.
no.
Um
Like all of the doors stay open in this movie. Like it's really weird how like this for some reason they have 3 bedrooms with like 3 queen beds in them,
yeah, yeah.
and none of
He's a day
them.
trader.
Yeah,
He can do that kind of thing.
and
I feel that.
none of them are like ever shut unless shut by a spectral force.
Yeah. Gosh, I thought I had another thing that I wanted to bring up that I kind of thought of as a criticism, but it's out of my mind. Do you have anything that you kind of are like, I don't know if this, like, we've really talked this movie up all these years, like, all these years later, talking about how good this movie is.
Yeah, it's not a perfect movie by any stretch.
Sure.
It's not like it's not going to go down as like one of my favorite horror movies, but I think it is. I think I can safely say this is a very solid movie
Yeah.
and it holds up better than I thought it was going
I
to.
appreciate it a whole lot more, divorced from the context of 2007.
Yeah.
Now that we've moved trends multiple times. So yeah, I don't know. This was it was nice to revisit this and be like, wow, you know what? I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I was not looking forward to like getting this six movie set, watching the first one and being like, "Ah, fuck, these suck."
Yeah. And how prescient too. Like this movie came out like shortly after YouTube became a thing.
Yeah.
And not long after this movie came out, somebody somewhere had the realization, oh, I can make low budget paranormal horror with stuff moving in the background and have people be creeped out by it and
Mhm.
draw people in. That became a genre that is so firmly established on YouTube, and now it's everywhere. It's like on TikTok. People are doing that shit on TikTok. I have a TikTok account, and occasionally it doesn't really work for me at all. But like people do that on TikTok. People try to make little mini paranormal activity movies on TikTok now.
Huh.
Like that is it really defined a genre of like online content too,
Yeah.
which is really kind of interesting to me because I've watched a bunch of that bullshit.
And I
it's-
think like it's interesting how that genre has persisted in a way. Like they're still making these movies, but no one talks about Paranormal Activity
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
I didn't know 7 was coming out until like I came across an ad on a trailer on like a YouTube video. I think like it basically the actual like knowledge of this franchise is at like an all-time low,
yeah,
but the content that it spawned is still out
it's
there.
eternal. I mean, it apparently gets people watching it, and you know those top tens videos I'm always making fun of, like those have been running for years now, doing that, like basically not even doing that content, just looking for that content and aggregating it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It's just funny to me that like so many people saw how easily exploitable this framework, this sort of like subgenre is, and everybody just ran with it to the point where, you know, like we said, we're kind of sick of it for a little while, and that's all the way back in the like late 2000s.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure there's really a lot else to talk about
No.
in this movie. I think we've covered most of it. It was much more enjoyable than I thought it was going. I thought that I was going to be like, oh yeah, that was fine.
Same.
And I ended up liking it more than that. It's so I am happy to find that, and I am kind of interested to see if any of the sequels live up to the original. Um, I have found like I've watched a good number of horror sequels in my time, and you usually the sequels end up taking on a life of their own, and if you can nail that, you can have some very enjoyable sequels. But I feel like that is an art that has been lost in everything other than the Fast and the Furious franchise.
Oh, I'll have to take your word for it on that one. Haven't
Yeah,
seen it yet.
you go from stealing DVD players to international espionage
Right.
over the course of that series. So yeah, I don't know. hopefully the sequels of these movies find their own thing to do, and I can like what that ends up being.
Yeah.
Um, that's all. So I don't know. Any final thoughts?
If you somehow have gotten this far into this episode and haven't seen Paranormal Activity and like horror movies, just go check this shit out.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
fun.
like it's a good movie. And you know, I guess I wouldn't fault anybody who just is like, I have no interest in found footage. But as far as found footage go, this is one of the better ones.
Yeah, I know there are a couple people in the Discord that just don't like horror movies. Eventually, we should probably do an It Gets Weirdish that's not a horror movie for those people, but it's Halloween, so you can understand why we went with what we did. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. We will see if there's any interest in us doing more of these on the feed. Um, we'll probably do at least one or two more. I don't know. We'll talk about it off mic. But this has been It Gets Weirdish for Paranormal Activity. Happy Halloween to all of you. I hope you
Yes,
all have a
yes.
very good Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Be careful for nuggets of marijuana and acid in your candy because we're giving that shit out this year. So watch out. We swapped out razor blades for expensive drugs.
Yeah. And also, I've buried some podcast episodes into certain candy bars available at Come and Goes.
Yeah.
So if you want to
Yes.
find exclusive It Gets Weird episodes, go buy the candy section at your local Come and Go.
It's a good bit and it doesn't benefit us in any way.
No, it's just a thing that I wanted to do. So yeah, this has been It Gets Weirdish. I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle signing out.
Peace.